a top news item, although it was covered in a major biased way. Still, it was all over the news. Lead story at Drudge was Sheriff Joe Arpaio's continued investigation into Barack Obama's birth certificate. Now, already a few months ago, Arpaio had a press conference where he announced that there were findings in the birth certificate of the PDF copy that Obama released online that are not consistent with an ordinary scanned copy. In other words, modifications. Well, now, Mike Zulu, Sheriff Joe Arpaio's lead investigator, went to Hawaii with a team, with Arpaio's posse, and they found some very interesting things. We are joined, because we go always directly to the news, we are joined right now by Mike Zulu, a Sheriff Joe Arpaio's lead investigator. Mike, welcome to the program. Now, for those who are listening on the internet, if you're by a computer right now, you may want to go to Obama's long-form birth certificate, the PDF copy released. It's at whitehouse.gov. If you look at it, you see, and we noticed this a long time ago, there are pencil marks all over the birth certificate with zeros, ones, and nines. Now, we didn't know what those meant. Now it seems we know exactly what they mean, and these markings are very significant. Mike, take us through it. Tell us what these markings mean. What are they?
What we discovered during the course of our investigation when we were in Hawaii, those numerical values were on that document. They looked like pencil markings to us. Nobody really knew what they were. When we were in Hawaii, we discovered that the procedure for the Department of Health was to take a birth certificate, check it for accuracy, and then code it with numerical values in some of the fields, such as father's race or type of business or employment, for federal statistics standards. In other words, what they would do is they would take these numerical values that are a designator to identify that information, and then the federal government would take that information and put those number values on magnetic tape for their own census information, and that's how they would derive the amount of births and whatnot throughout the nation. What we found is that the clerk, when they would receive the document, would check the document over. Then they would code it with these statistical values. Then they would give it to another individual to recheck it for accuracy, and at that time it was signed by the registrar and dated and accepted by the Department of Health. Well, the values were curious. If you look at Mr. Obama Sr.'s race, the box says African, and that's always been a point of contention because in the 60s, African wasn't a race designator. Next to it is the number 9. Well, we learned that the statistical codings in 1960 for the federal government, and actually through the remainder of the decade, number 9 stands for unstated, or information not supplied. Well, if you have unstated information or information that hasn't been supplied, you can't have a field in the box. It would be left blank.
So what you're saying here, to clarify, is that what happened was that somebody would fill out the birth certificate information, they would put it on the paper, and then a clerk, and then this was rechecked, would go and put these numbers, which until you went to Hawaii, people didn't really know what they meant, including 9. And if there was a 9 there, it means that information is missing, and yet, very strangely, in 9, for example, where you just said Obama's father was listed the race as African, there's a 9, but that should be blank. So I understand that you caught up with, we didn't really know exactly what this signature meant, like an E. Lee or V. Lee on the birth certificate. Well, you actually found Verna Lee, who's 95 years old. Apparently she was running the office at the time. What did you learn from her about these codes? And actually, did she say that it's possible that this could have been a mistake? That, in other words, let's say some clerk just got this and wrote a letter 9 by mistake, and yet the father's race was filled out, and so maybe this was an error.
Yeah, what she did is she laid out for us the procedure, what I just previously described, how the birth certificate came in and how it was coded. As far as the mistake is concerned, she told us basically not on her watch. She says that these were filled out by one individual, then rechecked by a different person for accuracy. And it should also be noted why her statement, we believe, has credibility, because the same number 9 appears in the box above for father's type of business or employer. With a number 9 there, but the box contains the word university. Well, it's really highly, highly improbable that two people are going to mismark a document, especially with the number 9. We are sure that number 9s were prevalent in Hawaii with a lot of missing information, especially on single-parent birth, single-mom birth. So it's going to be extremely hard to press the issue and say, well, it was a clerical mistake. According to her, it can't happen.
We're speaking with Mike Zulu, the lead investigator of Sheriff Joe Arpaio's Cold Posse team investigating President Obama's birth certificate. So then the question becomes, where did the 9 come from? There's been a lot of speculation over these last 2.5 years, since Obama refused to release the long form and then finally released it in PDF file on the internet. There's been a lot of speculation about two twins who were born in Hawaii at around the exact same time. Is it possible that the number 9 comes from their birth certificate, or a template that was copied from another birth certificate?
The number 9 do not come from the Nordyke birth certificates. Those are clearly marked Caucasian for both fields of the mother and father, and they are marked number 1, which is the appropriate marking for what would have been a white designator as far as race. So we don't believe it comes from the Nordyke. Now, it is possible, very possible, that it's a template of another birth certificate. However, I have to start to come to the conclusion that there was a reported birth for Mr. Obama, because it does appear in the 1961 newspaper filings. However, in Hawaii, an individual can go in and report a birth that is called unattended and merely state that the birth has taken place. The Department of Hawaii is compelled by statute to register the birth, but it can have a lot of information missing. So it's quite possible that this birth could have occurred somewhere. We know it didn't occur in Kapolani Medical Center. Somewhere else in the state, or more probably somewhere else outside of the state of Hawaii.
Yeah, you're talking here about the qualifications to obtain something called a certification of live birth, which Obama first released. This is not a birth certificate. I actually personally went through the laws of Hawaii in the 1960s when Obama was born and found that indeed there are actually ways, and even until now, I don't know if people realize this, that a mother today, right now in Hawaii, can either testified to the governor's office that she gave birth, and then she can get a certification of live birth, or she can also get a doctor to fill out a paper that she was pregnant, and then afterwards that she gave birth, and then some additional information, but not actually the long-form birth certificate. And then she also gets a certification of live birth, and then the newspapers in Hawaii back in the 1960s used to reprint any birth announcements that come from the Department of Health. In other words, if somebody would have, for example, gotten a certification of live birth. Now, what you're pointing out, and this is the second series of investigations that you conducted with Sheriff Joe Arpaio. The first focused on the PDF copy and modifications that were made in the PDF file, how the file is not consistent, according to forensic experts that you contacted, with a scanned document that would be scanned in its entirety. Now, I can tell you that I personally also hired 3 independent forensic investigators. Each one did not know I hired the other. It was for this program. Each one didn't know who I was. They had no political beef. I couldn't find any. So all 3 came back with the same conclusion, and that was that there were modifications on the PDF file that they could not explain, that are not consistent with a normal scan document. And so what you found, what these forensic investigators found, pretty much any news media outlet out there could actually find if anybody at any outlet simply hires forensic experts to go over the PDF file. Now, you have, and Sheriff Joe Arpaio has called for Congress to investigate this. Do you expect, have you been in touch with any members of Congress who will actually pick up this investigation?
We have not had any success with penetrating the fortress around this issue in Congress. I don't understand what the reluctancy is. I mean, it is amazing to me that elected officials, after millions of people clamoring about this for years, and now a law enforcement agency coming out for a second time, proving the document not only false through digital forensics, but now on its face with good old-fashioned police work and investigation, and nobody wants to do anything about it. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, well, also, what about the news media? Because I personally read a lot of the coverage in the mainstream news media of your press conference that was held this past week, and what they're doing is slamming Arpaio, claiming that he's doing this for political reasons because of the Justice Department investigation into him. But again, any media outlet that wants to hire forensic experts, I mean, I couldn't imagine President Bush releasing a PDF copy of some file, let's say his birth certificate, and then having actual modifications in the document, and then the news media is not going to hire forensic experts. So what about the news media? Are you surprised that they're not also doing very real investigating that is not too difficult to do in this case?
You know, I am shocked at the veracity that they attack us on over this. And just like you said, anybody worth their salt could hire somebody. Here's why they won't. They won't hire it because they know it's true. Here's why the Obama administration, every time there's a court challenge, never walked in with a document. Because like I said in the press conference, this document cannot survive judicial scrutiny. You cannot take it into a court and have it deemed authentic. There's not a forensic document examiner in the nation that could qualify this as an authentic document. The document fails every investigational test and will fail legal scrutiny. And we are confident that if you put this PDF on trial, we can defeat it in a court of law. It can never be authenticated.
All right, Mike Zulu, lead investigator for Sheriff Joe Arpaio on the birth certificate issue. Thank you for being here. I know a lot of people want to talk about this issue. It's one of your favorite topics, so start calling up now. I'm taking questions and comments immediately after the break. 1-800-848-WABC, 1-800-848-9222. Back with your calls next. All right, we have finally arrived at the moment you've all been waiting for these last 2 weeks. I am now going to officially name and announce the name of my tiny little puppy, who again is right here in the studio with me. This tiny guy, his name is... Drum roll, please. Although, actually, I forgot to tell them to have a drum roll ready. The name is, speaking of weapons, speaking of assault rifles, speaking of ammunition, the name is Uzi. Uzi, of course, is the Israeli assault rifle, the Israeli open-bolt, blowback-operated submachine gun. This tiny guy's name is Uzi. Uzi also, by the way, is an Israeli name in general. Anyway, let's get to the phone calls here. Many calls, including about guns, including about ammunition, apparently. So, Uzi, pay attention. Let's go to Mike in Hackettstown, New Jersey. Hi, Mike.
Hello?
Yep, you're on the radio.
Oh, excellent show, by the way. Excellent show.
Thank you.
I just want to bring to everybody's attention something that I've learned about this past spring. You will recall that during the 2008 election, the campaign, Obama stated that he wanted to create a 300,000-man interior defense force, trained and equipped like the military, but not under the military's jurisdiction. Recently, going back February, March, April, he has ordered over 450 million rounds of .40 caliber ammunition. Now,
this came in through the Department of Homeland Security. But before that, in 2007, Obama, then candidate Obama, talked about having, he said, a civilian army that would be like the military, although he did not exactly qualify whether he meant that they would be armed or not armed, in which way would they be like the military, or is he talking at the time about some sort of Saul Alinsky style, let's say, army of community organizers? We're not exactly sure, but what we are sure about is that the Department of Homeland Security absolutely did order 450 million rounds of ammunition over these next 5 years. What do they need that for? Well, I can tell you from what's coming in the next 4 years, if Obama's elected, to be revealed in my book, Fool Me Twice. I'm not going to tell you too much right now. We'll talk about it in the coming weeks. But believe you me, those rounds of ammunition will have very little to do with border patrol on the U.S. border, because among President Obama's second-term plans happens to be to ensure, I don't want to give much away, but let's just say that the border agents will have a very difficult time with the new coming directives in Obama's second term with apprehending anybody at the border or with even carrying weapons within a certain vicinity of the border. It's going to be madness, and these are going to be directives that are going to be executive order style, Justice Department style, Homeland Security style. In other words, not through Congress. In other words, not through the people. That's what's coming. So I can tell you that the 450 million rounds of ammunition probably doesn't have too much to do with protecting the borders. Thank you. Let's go to Eric in Jersey City, New Jersey. Hi, Eric.
Hi. I wanted to say everything has been amended since it was created. The Old Testament, the Constitution had amendments, and I don't see the relevance now, at 300 some odd years after the founding of this country, why guns, are still relevant, and we're not cowboys anymore, in the hands of ordinary citizens, and why, why.
Wait, but do you mean all guns? That, in other words, civilians should never have the right to be armed?
No, absolutely not. I mean, if civilians have jobs which, like security agents or something like that for a bank or the private sector security, but I'm talking about average citizens, the right to bear arms. I mean, where has that gotten this country in a positive light, other than kill out? And I'm not talking about killings what happened this week. I'm talking about where has the right to bear arms benefited, other than the gun dealerships and the NRA lobbyists? What has
so you heard me in the earlier segments that I am definitely, on the one hand, an advocate of the right to bear arms, but on the other, I do absolutely, certainly would advocate for certain types of regulation of assault rifles, of drum rounds and other things. But it's ridiculous to say that unless you have a job as a security guard in a bank or something like that, if you're an average civilian, you shouldn't have the right to bear arms. Look at what is happening in our country today. You look at the madness that is going on with Occupy Wall Street, with the riots, with even the possibility of race riots that we saw down in Florida. With these flash mobs that are descending in places like Philadelphia and California, and a lot of unreported violence, by the way, that's going on in New York. I am sorry to say, Eric, but I don't think that it's fair at all to tell civilians that they don't have the right to bear arms. That being said, having military-style arms, that being said, having drum rounds, I'm not exactly sure that they should have. Thank you, Eric. Let's go to Angela in central New Jersey. Hi, Angelo.
Yeah,
Angelo.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah,
Aaron.
you're on. Yeah.
I just wanted to relay back to some of these people who believe in Solinsky and Karl Marx.
Okay, but I will warn you, we have only about 45 seconds before we have to break, so what is that? Sure, go for it.
There are three authors of three different books where the Founding Fathers have pulled together what is known for this country, and that's the Constitution. Okay, John Locke, Emery Vattel, and Charles...
Wait, so are you saying basically the Constitution should be amended? Is that it?
Excuse me, but the Constitution was already amended, and these people better be following it.
Well, all right. Thank you, Angelo, in central New Jersey. So many more phone calls here. Uzi's standing by. Also, up next, we are going to go to Mitt Romney's visit to the Middle East, what we can expect, plus, as I said, my investigation into Hillary Clinton's chief of staff and the Muslim Brotherhood.
Aaron Klein, Investigative Radio, only on 77 WABC.
Police in Bulgaria today say they're investigating whether there may be two more suspects in the terrorist bombing that we saw last week, targeting an Israeli tour bus, killing 5 Israeli tourists and the Bulgarian driver, this in Bulgaria. Right now, the United States is corroborating what Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, said immediately after the attacks, and that is officials telling the New York Times that the U.S. information is also that we're talking here about Hezbollah operatives acting at the behest of Iran, probably to avenge the attacks against Iranian nuclear scientists by Israel. And so right now, all eyes are on the Olympics. Will there be more further terrorism by Iran? Joining us to discuss this unfolding situation and what it means for the possibility of an attack on Iran in the very near future is former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton. Ambassador Bolton, welcome to Aaron Klein Investigative Radio.
Well, glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you were on Fox News this past week, and you talked about how Israel may be poised now to launch a direct attack on Iran in the wake of this terrorist bombing in Bulgaria. Now, what we have heard over the last few months is the possibility, really years now actually, of an Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. If indeed Israel is going to carry out an attack, would you recommend also at the same time an all-out war against Iran's Revolutionary Guards?
Well, I have believed for quite some time that Israel or the United States should strike Iran's nuclear weapons program because of its speed with which it's approaching a nuclear weapons capability. And I think there's a lot we don't know about the program that could well be further along than our limited intelligence tells us. So I think that would be appropriate as a legitimate exercise of self-defense at any point. But in light of this bombing in Bulgaria, which is only the latest in a string of attacks against Israeli and Jewish targets around the world over the past 18 months, which have also been linked to Iran and Hezbollah, I think Israel is fully justified in retaliation, not just against Hezbollah here, but against Iran itself, including the Revolutionary Guards. Now, the extent of that retaliation obviously is a matter that the Israelis are going to have to decide, but I don't think as a matter of legitimacy and morality there should be any question here that Israel is fully within its rights to conduct self-defense in the face of terrorist attacks like that.
Yeah, this has been Iran's long de facto modus operandi of using a terrorist proxy in order to carry out an attack against Israelis, and also, of course, against Westerners, in the past even against the United States. Now, while we have the Iranian Hezbollah monster, the Iranian Hezbollah Shiite axis, we also have the Sunni axis, prominently the Muslim Brotherhood, which now, of course, took the presidency in Egypt, even though actually originally the Muslim Brotherhood, I thought, said that they would not run a candidate in the presidential elections. Now, this past week we had Hillary Clinton going over to meet with the Muslim Brotherhood's new president, of course, the president of Egypt, Mohamed Morsi. She had a photo opportunity with him. You could see her really smiling from ear to ear next to Egypt's new president. And then right after Hillary went over, we had Hamas leader Khaled Meshal just this past Thursday meeting also with Morsi and hailing the Morsi's election as the start of a new era for Egypt, for the Palestinians. I can tell you, Ambassador Bolton, that I also had the chief of Hamas in the Gaza Strip on my program, Dr. Mahmoud al-Zahar, and he also boasted of a new era of Islam. He went further in the region because of the Muslim Brotherhood presidency. Do you believe that it is so wise at this point to be embracing the Muslim Brotherhood? I know there's a major dilemma of what to do, but do you think that the U.S. should be embracing the Muslim Brotherhood the way they are?
No, I don't think so at all, given their record over the decades. I think Egypt is a case where it's not entirely clear who is in power. The title of president doesn't necessarily convey the same authority in Egypt's government that it does in the United States. And the military in Egypt is something we have worked on for 30-plus years since the Camp David Accords. We've put billions of dollars of aid into the military, and it remains clearly one of the major factors in Egyptian politics. So I don't, at this point, think that we should sort of throw the entire Egyptian government to the side, because I think that might well make matters worse. But I think we've got to watch very, very carefully to see if the new president and his political allies in Parliament, if that comes back into session, carry through on some of the things they said during their election campaigns about gutting Camp David or leaving the Camp David Accords entirely, because that would be a very, very dramatic change to the foundation of American foreign policy in the region since 1979.
Yeah, I can tell you that the Egyptian military is still working on all levels with Israel. I've talked numerous times also separately to the Egyptian military, to officials on this program and for my reporting, and they are very upset about what is going on with the larger scheme of things in the Middle East, and not only in Egypt, in their own country, also in Syria, where you have Bashar Assad, president of Syria, on the one hand, part of the Iranian axis, Hezbollah axis, and then on the other, the opposition, which has a big question mark on it. We're not sure who the opposition is in Syria. And are they or are they not being aided by the United States? Are they or are they not even working right now with Islamist elements, including possibly, who knows, even Al-Qaeda? Now, this past week, we saw major devastation and setback for Assad of Syria. Of course, the bombing, the targeting of the defense minister, Russia still backing and arming Assad to the hills, and Assad now attempting major escalation of war against the rebels in the coming weeks. Do you see, Ambassador Bolton, this dragging on, this, of course, the Assad war against the rebels war against Assad, do you see this dragging on for many months, even past the U.S. elections? Or also, do you think that we're going to see at any point international military intervention in Syria?
Well, I think the assassination of the defense minister and Assad's brother-in-law and others in the past couple of days shows how vulnerable the regime is. And if Assad does not respond with devastating force against the opposition soon, I think the assassination will potentially shatter his regime, because it has to instill fear in every official that if bombers can get into the defense ministry, that no one is safe. Now, Assad appears to be doing, unfortunately, exactly what I just predicted in massive attacks in Damascus and elsewhere. We'll have to see if they succeed. I think this is also a period of great vulnerability for the potential use of Syria's chemical weapons against the opposition. That would be a dramatic escalation, but not unprecedented in the Assad family dictatorship there. So it's a very delicate moment. The Russians themselves said a few days ago that the decisive battle for Syria had begun, and that would indicate their feeling is that this could go quickly. But, the situation inside Syria is very unclear. I think that the United States and others need to focus primarily on the weapons of mass destruction there, the chemical weapons, the biological weapons program, the remaining aspects of the nuclear program probably put there by Iran, to make sure that those weapons and materials don't fall into the wrong hands.
Yeah, and also, of course, there's also the threat that if Assad becomes so desperate, he could even launch some attacks against Israel to kind of sidestep the war and distract the rebels there. And then, of course, if he has chemical or biological weapons, it could be devastating. I know I am, of course, broadcasting from Israel, from Tel Aviv, Israel. You're part of the Team Romney. Mitt Romney scheduled to visit Israel at the end of this month. What do you expect? What do you hope will come from the Mitt Romney visit to Israel?
Well, certainly, I think he hopes that he will be able to deepen his understanding of the situation in the region and Israel's plight faced by the continuing Iranian nuclear weapons program, Iran's support for terrorists from Hezbollah in Lebanon to Hamas in the Gaza Strip, obviously this civil war and beyond in Syria and the threats that could be posed to the stability of Lebanon and indeed stability all around the region, given the Muslim Brotherhood's election victories in Egypt. So it's a very, very important moment, I think, to be in the region. I think it demonstrates why Governor Romney has said time and again that he will treat Israel like a real ally, not like an adversary. And so it'll give him a chance to talk to a wide range of people in Israel, and I think will be very beneficial for him.
And do you believe that this will give him an opportunity to contrast the Romney team, the Romney campaign, from the way that President Obama has been treating Israel?
I think his simple presence in Israel says it all. Obama's been in office 3.5 years. He's had time to do more fundraisers than any other first-term American president, probably played more rounds of golf than any president since Dwight Eisenhower, and yet has not been able to fit into his busy schedule even one trip to Israel. I think Governor Romney's committed to the security of Israel in ways that are really very consistent with what used to be the broad bipartisan tradition of American politics, a tradition that has not been followed by the Obama administration.
Former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, up next, our continued investigation into Hillary Clinton's chief of staff and the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm glad to know that Michelle Bachmann is either listening to this program or following my reporting. Good for her. Good for sending that 16-page letter simply documenting the Muslim Brotherhood ties to various U.S. officials and then asking Congress to investigate. Of course they should investigate, and shame on John McCain for slamming Michelle Bachmann for simply bringing up questions that I think every American ought to have, and that is, why are there officials in the United States that are so deeply connected to the Muslim Brotherhood? Also, by the way, John Boehner, did you hear his statements? Because in Michelle Bachmann's 16-page letter, that again, she didn't make accusations. She documented fact after fact and called for Congress to investigate. A large part of the letter was about Huma Abedin, Hillary Clinton's chief of staff. You remember I talked for months, investigated for months, Huma's links to the Muslim Brotherhood, although actually Michelle Bachmann seems to have missed perhaps the biggest story. I'll tell you what she missed, but before that, Bachmann in her letter did bring up various concerns, again, all just documented fact, and then calling for an investigation about Huma's mother, about Huma's father, about Huma's brother, and their ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. You might know that just a few weeks ago, I did an article that was linked at the Drudge Report that I actually think Michelle Bachmann used in part in her letter to Congress calling for an investigation, where I talked about and then also quoted from Walid Shoebat, who found that Huma Abedin's mother served in what was known as the Muslim Sisterhood, which is basically the de facto version of the Muslim Brotherhood, and she served there alongside the wife of Egypt's new president, Mohamed Morsi. Now, again, we can connect now from Morsi, the new Egyptian president, to Huma Abedin's mother, but there's a lot more about the mother, to then Huma Abedin herself, who, of course, is the wife of disgraced Congressman Anthony Weiner, but also the chief of staff of Hillary Clinton. And then Hillary Clinton just goes to Egypt and meets with Mohamed Morsi, smiles ear to ear. And then a few days after the Hillary meeting, the new chief of Hamas also met with the Egyptian president and praised the new era that the Muslim Brotherhood represents in the Middle East. And so let's go directly to exactly what Michelle Bachmann wrote about Huma Abedin, but again, she missed the major story. But just before that, Speaker John Boehner, amazingly, did you hear this? Not only John McCain defends Huma Abedin, which is incredible but expected, there is no opposition when the actual opposition leader here said, quote, "I don't know Huma, but from everything I do know of her, she has a sterling character. And I think accusations like this being thrown around are pretty dangerous." Well, then, if you don't know Huma, you better keep your mouth shut. And even if she does have a sterling character, these links are still there. Bachmann taking so much heat for daring to ask what every single American should be concerned about, and that is the Muslim Brotherhood possibly infiltrating the United States government, but at the least, these deep connections of the U.S. to the Muslim Brotherhood. So let's get to what Michelle Bachmann wrote exactly about the links here, not only to the Muslim Brotherhood, but something called, which is, I think, just as concerning, if not more, something called the Muslim World League. The League is a charity that is known to have spawned terrorist organizations. And I'm actually talking about terrorist groups declared by the United States government to be official fronts for Al-Qaeda. That's the Muslim World League. The Muslim World League was one of 3 favorite charities named by Osama bin Laden himself as his favorite charities to funnel money through. And again, their various offshoots have been declared official terrorist organizations by the United States, by the United Nations. That's how bad the Muslim World League is. Now let's get to the letter where Bachmann noted the connections of Huma Abedin's family to the Muslim World League. But she only wrote that Huma's father, who is Professor Saeed Abedin, was the founder, and I'm quoting from the letter here, of the Institute of Minority Affairs, a Saudi group that, writes Bachmann, had the quiet but active support of Umar Abdullah Nassif, the Secretary General of the Muslim World League. So that's as far as Michelle Bachmann got, that Huma's father, Professor Saeed Abedin, founded a group that simply had the support of the Muslim World League, which, again, founded terrorist groups declared by the United States as terrorist organizations. But actually, she missed the most major story, and that is that Salaha Abedin, Huma's mother, was an official representative of the Muslim World League itself. That's right, I found that Hillary Clinton's chief of staff in the 1990s served as a delegate and represented multiple times officially the Muslim World League, Osama bin Laden's favorite charity. Now, this is the Muslim World League that back in the 1980s founded a group called Al-Haramain Islamic Foundation, which developed chapters in about 50 countries, including, by the way, even for a small period of time in the United States, in Oregon, until it was shut down and designated a terrorist organization. This Al-Haramain, their offices in Kenya and Tanzania, were actually the sponsors and the planners with Al-Qaeda of the 1998 bombings of the 2 American embassies in East Africa. This was the bombings that where I first, as a student, by the way, started to pay attention to Al-Qaeda, to Osama bin Laden, realizing the major threat that they are. And so now, for Michelle Bachmann daring to simply bring this up, there are some who are even questioning whether Michelle Bachmann's political career should be in jeopardy. In fact, actually, progressive groups, including Think Progress, which we were talking about earlier in the program, led by John Podesta, Obama's former transition team director, they're calling on Michelle Bachmann to be investigated for Islamophobia. Do you understand how insane this is? Do you understand that the enemy is not just at the gates at this point? The Muslim Brotherhood enemy is inside the gates, and it seems that anybody who even dares to bring up questions, they're the ones who are attacked as extremists. Anyway, it's a mad, mad world. Alice Through the Looking Glass 180 inversion of reality, but I'll continue to invert it back to the truth week after week right here on this program, Aaron Klein Investigative Radio. Be sure, of course, to check out Klein Online every single day. My program every Sunday, 7 to 9 p.m. Stay tuned for John Batchelor.